Good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee of Worcester City Council, and it's our first committee meeting of the civic year, so with the new makeup and new faces round the table. So welcome to everybody. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Right. Appointment of substitutes is the first item.
Yes, Chair. We have two substitutes. Richard Dugan is here for Adrian Gregson and Karen Lawrence is here for Mel Orcar.
Thank you very much. Next item is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations? Several. Jessie?
In relation to the Scala item, I was involved in the early stages of a proposal. I'm no longer in contact with him, but I have to declare that interest.
Alex?
I work for a company that provides software for food and beverage providers, so I'm just declaring my interest on that point.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the Scala item, a family member is an ex-employee of Worcester City Council.
Just occurred to me, Chair, I should declare an interest as a member of Friends of Cribblegate Park.
Agenda item 5 on a non-pecuniary interest. I'm a director of BID.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yes, I'm on the Friends of Cribblegate Park as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Public representations. Welcome. We have a public speaker today, Mr. Mackey. Over to you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to use the public participation part of your meeting today to speak regarding the future of Worcestershire County Cricket Club at New Road, Worcester, which all of you will be aware hangs under a cloud of uncertainty following the floods of the winter and spring over the past 8 months. 8 floods in total. The club is currently carrying out a study of all options concerning the future of the ground, whether it be flood prevention measures such as a wall built around the perimeter of New Road. This solution, according to one of the country's leading flood prevention experts, Ms. Mary Donoghue Long, OBE, is a feasible one, despite the estimated cost of putting in such works at £5 million. Mr. Donoghue is a leading expert in anti-flood measures across the country and in Europe. Has recently held a meeting with Ashley Giles, the CEO of the County Cricket Club, at his request. Regretfully, the choice of moving elsewhere in the Worcester area or county area also appears to be the negative option, which is hitting the headlines. This should not be considered any further, in my view, because there is nowhere suitable for the relocation of the ground, and the club's 3,000 members, who will have the final say, will never agree to this solution. The overwhelming majority of members, I believe, are in favour of staying at New Road, where Worcestershire has played for 125 years, and in doing so, put up with the annual floods which have occurred most years during that period, and cleared up the mess afterwards. This has always been successfully achieved. Witness last week, where the playing area is almost ready for first-class cricket to start on Friday this week, thanks to the tireless efforts of the ground staff and the elderly members, including myself, who've been washing down and cleaning seats. I have a letter from Robin Walker, the MP, indicating that the club's told him that it does not wish to relocate, but, quote, increasing frequency and intensity of flooding is making the site unviable for cricket. Mr. Walker is to raise the matter in Parliament and will be pushing the DCMS and DEFRA to get Worcestershire County Cricket Club the help, advice and support it needs for the development, the support it needs, including potential funding, etc. Interestingly, only last week, the England Cricket Board have announced a £45 million total grant to all 18 first-class counties for the development of the game in all its forms. May I respectfully suggest, Madam Chair, that this council considers forming a partnership with the County Council to help fund the cost of flood prevention and supports the club in any future application for financial support from the National Lottery, English Heritage and many others. A joint city and county approach to keep New Road as the headquarters for Worcestershire County Cricket Club, including Worcestershire Women and a youth academy, must be a priority for the club and for both authorities. Therefore, may I suggest that a fund is put aside in each authority's future budgets or capital programmes to help the club fund either permanent flood prevention measures or contribute towards the cost of making the ground and facilities fit for purpose. I understand that the council, or your committee, Madam Chair, will be considering levelling up funds, totalling £5 million that has to be spent by March 2027. Nearly £1 million is to be spent on another historic Worcester site, namely Pitchcroft. Could some of this fund be set aside for help flood prevention at New Road? Just a suggestion. Thank you for hearing what I have had to say, both on my own behalf and having been a member since 1947, of what I firmly believe has the support of not just the members, but the people of this city and county. Worcester has lost so much over the years. Its professional rugby club, its historic city football ground, the Royal Porcelain Works, to name just three. We must never lose the County Cricket Club. It's part of our heritage, identity and character, like the cathedral, which makes this iconic ground famous across the world. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mackingham, for raising that with us. I think many of us around the table share your concerns. We look for for ways to move ahead, and you will get a response from officers.
Could I also add thanks of those who read the Worcester News, the statement that you had printed last week, I think, in support of what I've said and what you think. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. So moving on to item 4, for the minutes. And we actually have 2 sets of minutes here. So the 19th of March was the last regular Policy and Resources Committee. I personally wasn't present, so there are people round the table that were there then. Are we happy to accept those? Are there any amendments? Do you want me to run through the pages? Page 1, page 2, page 3. And there was an exempt item, page 4. Yep, okay. And then the more recent set of minutes was the extra Policy and Resources Committee on the 23rd of April that took place in order to look at the Culture Fund that we've got on the agenda today. So people happy to agree the minutes of that? It was a kind of one item agenda. Yep, okay. Thank you very much. I'll sign those. So then we move on to the Levelling Up Fund Cultural Investment update, because we've got a bit more time and things have developed since the last meeting. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Am I still on? Yes. Okay. It says logged off back here, but anyway, hope not. Right, so members will, some members will be aware that in terms of the background, we were informed on the 6th of March that the department was allocating £5 million of levelling up funding to Worcester City, to the council in particular as the accountable body for development of cultural activities in the city. This was a capital only allocation and the funding was to be spent by March 26. Originally, the deadline for the submission of the £5 million business plan was the 10th of May, but that has been extended now to the 3rd of June, which is slightly more helpful, but is still creating some challenges for us. If you move on to section 3, you'll see the list of projects that the committee agreed to progress. You'll see those listed there. I'm not going to go through each one of those individual 13 projects, but I'll move on to the next part of the process that we've been through. So since the identification of those 13 projects, officers have carried out significant further due diligence, and it has become clear that in some areas the costs that we originally estimated have significantly increased. And so you'll see that in Appendix 1, that gives you the details of the current level of allocation. The projects that have had the greatest increase are the Music for Everyone in Cripplegate and Gulliver Parks. When we started to look at the cost of a new bandstand in Cripplegate, plus the cost of repairs to the listed bandstand in Gulliver, plus the additional toilet blocks and the new toilets, it became clear that the original estimate was insufficient. So in order to take those projects forward, we had to make the rather difficult decision in terms of reallocation of funding. there were two projects, community stage and sustainable events at Pitchcroft, that had still some significant issues with them. You'll see the comments in sections 3.5 and 3.6 go into some of those. So it was recommended, or it is recommended by officers, that we don't proceed with those two projects, but proceed with the remaining 11 projects. Now, if I just turn to the appendix itself, we are in the process of submitting or preparing a submission to the department. As I said, the deadline for that is now the 3rd of June. I'll just give you a little bit of background to that because I think it helps put the appendix into context. So I've just written down the sections that we are having to complete for the submission, and that includes a section on stakeholder engagement, 11 sections, one for each of the projects, a subsidy control section, which in old money is state aid. Some of you will be aware of what state aid means and how we have limitations on what we can support in terms of funding to private businesses. There is then a section on grant dispersal, where we have to name any external body that we are funding. And in this case, there are 4 external organisations: Seven Arts, Tudor House, Worcester Theatres and the Battle of Worcester Society. The other projects, the funding remains within the council's control. We then have to provide project funding across the 11 projects by individual quarterly report from now up until March 26. We have to provide a project outputs list by project, again profiled to March 26. We have to provide a project outcomes profile to March 26. We have to provide a risk register, and we have to provide individual project milestones for each of the projects named. So we're in the process of completing that document at the moment. What you see in front of you in terms of Appendix 1 is each of the 11 project description tabs that have been lifted from that submission. So I haven't given you all of the other tabs, you'll be pleased to know. But those projects listed in the appendix set out as per we've explained what we're trying to achieve in the submission tab. In terms of the rest of the alternative options, we could of course decide that we didn't want to submit a bid or lower the value of the bid. That would mean foregoing up to the £5 million that we've been allocated. So that's not really something we would recommend to members. In terms of financial and budgetary implications, of course the decision tonight to proceed with the submission and the recommendations doesn't actually give us any financial implications per se. Those will come later on if we are successful in our proposals and we become the accountable body for the projects. And that's covered somewhat in our legal and governance implications in the report. There are no direct risks arising from the report. As I say, other than failure to submit the bid by the due date will result in us not having secured the money. I'll just move on. I won't go through all of those. They're all set out in terms of implications in the report. In terms of the next steps, as I said, the deadline for submission is the 3rd of June. And so subject to members agreeing the list of projects tonight and the recommendations, the proposal is that we continue to develop the submission plan the one I just mentioned a moment ago, and get that as far as we can finished by this Friday. It's my intention then to send that document to the chair and the vice chair of this committee so that they've got some bank holiday weekend reading. Sorry, I'm sharing the pain. We've got a date in the diary next Wednesday where I will take you through all of those individual elements within the submission so you can see what we've done in terms of outputs, outcomes, risk, project funding, take you through that. And then, all being well, the plan will be that we will finalise that document towards the end of next week, and I'm hoping that we can submit the proposal on the Friday. The deadline is actually the Monday, but as you would imagine, I'm aiming for Friday. If something goes wrong on Monday, we have a power cut or something, it could cost us £5 million. So the plan is to get the bids submitted on Friday, subject to members agreeing the recommendations in the report this evening, and then subject to the chair and vice chairs reviewing the submission and signing that off for submission by the end of next week. I'll stop at that point and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, observations, comments? Robin?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously pleased to see the bandstands being repaired in or upgraded in Gurleyvelt Park and the bandstand in Cripplegate Park. I won't take away from any of Richard's glee at that happening. We were talking, I think, about particularly in Cripplegate Park, about enhancing the play provision in there at the same time. Perhaps it's me and I'm going word blind, but I can't see any references to play in the description for Cripplegate Park.
So I think if I just answer on behalf of the Managing Director, it's not included within the levelling up bid as it stands. But just to remind members, we have an allocation of £400,000 from SIL, and Cripplegate Park is certainly on our radar for play improvements. So just because it doesn't form part of this levelling up project, that doesn't mean there aren't going to be play improvements and play enhancements at Cripplegate Park. So it's certainly on office's agenda. It will be considered as a potential location for a pump track when we bring a future report on that item later on, but it's certainly not lost.
Okay, thanks for that, Lloyd. I mean, I'm obviously aware of the SIL allocation to play. I think we talked about this very early on in the bid, and I know the loose connection to culture and the tight requirement for culture about play. It was just I saw an opportunity, that was all. And I think we were talking about this very early on during this phase, and I just wondered why it had got lost, but quite happy for that to happen.
Yeah, you're quite right, Robin. We were looking to include those types of amenities in order to be able to deliver part of the play plan through the Levelling Up Fund, and also demonstrate through the play opportunity, the opportunity to widen participation and bring families and a wider audience to the performance space, for want of a better word. Unfortunately, within the budget we've got, the escalation in costs around the toilets and the bandstands and the lake and various other things have pushed that to one side, but we haven't forgotten the discussion about it, and as Lloyd says, we're picking it up elsewhere.
And if I may, I'm just aware of those increases in costs, so I'm quite, as I say, I'm quite happy. I just didn't want, I got confused.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Robin.
I've got Alex next.
Thank you. As a new member of the committee, I've got like 4 questions. Do I want to ask them all at once?
It depends. Give me the first one and then I'll see.
Okay, well, first I just want to say thank you for officers as a new member of the committee for all the hard work on this. I know it's been a lot of time pressure, and I'm sure, as everyone already knows in this room, it's a ridiculous way for government to fund local government by dropping these things on at short notice, rather than allowing long-term planning. So the first question was, have we exhausted the list of potential cultural projects now in case any further grants become available?
I think we do have some other things that we would like to do, but it depends how long we're given to develop the proposals. I think, you know, there are certain other things that we wanted to bring forward, but we just didn't have the time. Most of the things on this list, or a number of the things, if I put it that way, on this list, are things that have been in train for some time. They are not starting from scratch. It's almost impossible to get this sort of project to this level of detail from zero in the period of time we've had. So I think the answer is there are some other things that we'd like to do, but the level of development that they are at the moment does not really allow us to get them brought forward for this sort of thing in the time we had available for this submission.
Okay, thank you. On Angel Place is your space. So there's a number of bike stands in Angel Place at the moment, and outside Corn Market. Can you confirm that these will be retained or even increased? Because it'd be lovely to see like a LTN 120 compliant cargo bike parking out there as well.
I can answer that. I think, as I mentioned to you previously, we're not planning to do any groundworks on Angel Place. We're not proposing within this particular project to dig up any of the surface. So any installation that's there will remain. We might be able to increase some of those, but it wouldn't be in terms of fixed installations, but there are other ways of providing bike racks, so it might be possible. The only thing I would say in terms of caveating that is, at the moment, Angel Place is going to hopefully serve three functions. It's going to provide additional outside performance space for the Scala. It's going to continue to provide space for the market stalls, and we're looking to now provide additional space to create dwell time and space for families and young people in particular. So it is quite challenging to put anything else in, but we will look at it and see what we can accommodate. And of course, before any decision is made, the final design options will be brought back to members anyway for final decision.
Brilliant, thank you very much. The Scala co-working space at 6 Angel Place, there's not a lot of detail in the report about what surveys have been done on that building, so I just wanted to check how confident are we that there won't be structural or other serious issues found in that building as the work progresses.
Okay. In the time we've had available, we're about as confident as we can be. It was a retail unit up until recently. The upper floors are pretty sound. We will need to do more work as we get forward to planning and various other things. So it's a very valid point, but we're as sure as we can be on that particular building.
The final one was on the music box. The budget is increased for that by 15,000. Is that solely down to a switch to an electric vehicle? And do Seven Arts have access to charging infrastructure for it?
The answer is yes and yes. And I was pleasantly surprised personally that it was only an additional 15k. So that worked out quite well. And I can't remember who prompted the suggestion, which member, but that's the reason. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Elena next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points of clarification, if I could. In terms of, I harp on about this constantly. Swan Theatre, the proposed change in places and the lift, is that now fully compliant to take motorised scooters and motorised wheelchairs? And then the similar point goes to the works to the Museum and Art Gallery. There's mention there that it's be more inclusive towards those with disabilities and special educational needs. But does the current lift that's there, will that be able to meet the requirements of motorised scooters and wheelchairs to make it fully inclusive and accessible? And what are the chances of getting a change in spaces toilet there as well?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So, Worcester Theatres, the points have been fed back and taken on board, so any new lift facility will be large enough and have the lifting capacity to include a mobility scooter. So that's okay. The Museum and Art Gallery lift is in the process of being replaced also at the moment because it's reaching the end of its life, and that will continue to be accessible in terms of acquiring a mobility scooter. And the Swan Theatre will include a change in places toilet.
About the Museum and Art Gallery? I know that Swan Theatre's got the new change in places, but how about the Museum and Art Gallery?
We're not planning to include a change in places toilet in the Museum and Art Gallery, no.
Okay, I've got Jabba next.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. I mean, first of all, I think it's to reiterate Councillor Mace's point in terms of the amount of effort officers have had to put in to turn this around and get us somewhere close to a submission has been phenomenal. So my thanks goes to all the officers and hard work that had gone into this. There's obviously a really good variety of projects within this bid, which cover a lot of things. However, I mean, the stark reality of this bid is that it fails to, if I fail to understand how it actually levels up or relates to anybody from, say, for example, the areas of highest need who's struggling to meet with their daily income, who's unable to get on a bus to be able to visit into the centre of Worcester, to the most of the attractions that are in this. How does it level them up? How does it level them up? How are they going to be able to relate, apart from probably one project, which is probably the music box at a cost of 80,000, which represents 1.6% of the total budget of this, is actually directly related, that you could say that actually helps those people in our areas of highest needs that need culture the most. I think it's not a set of priorities that a Labour government or a Labour administration would put forward. However, we realise that we are in the place that we are in terms of that, and you know, I commend the report, the suggestions within this. And however, in hindsight, if the opportunity ever came again, I would love to have officers to have some of those projects that do directly relate to our communities that never ever able to access culture in this way. And relating to what the public speaker said earlier today as well, in terms of the whole government focus has excluded many of the facets of levelling up or culture that most of the residents of the city want. So sport, neither sport nor play was included in that. It just shows such a narrow mindset of thinking of how this was proposed to us. It's all, you know, targeted at a certain set of the city and of a genre of people.
Thank you. Yeah, well, yeah.
Through you, Chair. I think your question is probably aimed more at Jacob Young, the Minister for Levelling Up, than it is at me. But all I can say is, as members will know, we are constrained by the culture title. We were given a very clear set of outputs and outcomes that we had to deliver against. We were not given free rein. Those were very, very clear and very constraining in terms of the types of project we could consider. When I met with Jacob Young and Robin Walker, I did make the point to him that if it was down to me in terms of determining a levelling up programme, I wouldn't start here with cultural projects. I would start to look at business startup, enterprise growth, skills, all of the areas that you would expect a normal levelling up project to address. But we are where we are. However, having said that, I think it is also fair to say that with all of these projects, there will be hopefully an increase in economic activity. There will be more visitors to the city. There will hopefully be more jobs created through the range of projects, but not to such an extent as we could hopefully achieved with a different focus. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Louis.
Thank you. Yes, I'd also like to echo the earlier comments about the fantastic work that's been done by officers. You've done an incredible amount of work in a short amount of time and prepared a lot of detail. And I think Jabba made a very good point about a levelling up as well. And it's a really good point that we actually need to have more sort of spade, shovel-ready projects, which can then be taken up at a later point, so that we can take those skills and training projects forward that would do more work for those areas that really do need it. But my question is, I really do acknowledge the amount of work you've done. I can see the amount of work the officers have done. You've gone through so many hurdles and had to do so much paperwork to even get to this point. And I'm sure there's a lot more work to go. But one thing that I would like you to keep in mind is that I think it's very important that we also do keep in mind that whenever you're building infrastructure, you're only doing it once and it should last for a long time. And we've all declared a climate emergency. And we've said that we would like to be carbon neutral by 2030. So I think we do need to get back into the habit of, whenever we're looking at any future projects, is always doing that environmental assessment and having that risk assessment and looking at every single project and making sure that we have considered wherever possible and wherever practical to make sure we're building in the low carbon solutions that are not just going to be compliant with design best practice now, but we should be perhaps pushing that envelope a little bit further so that we are future proof for that. So I'm not expecting a detailed answer, but what I'm asking really is that in the coming days, weeks and months as we go through the project, that you do keep in mind those environmental aspects as well. And I'm sure other councils around the room would like to see that as well. And let's try and build in the best type of environmental low carbon solutions as well. Like, for example, you've already done with the having electric vehicle for the music vehicle and so on. So if we can carry on working together on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the prompt. I've made a note of it, and we'll make sure that when we complete the business case, we'll include that element within it.
Thank you, Chair. And I agree with everything Louis just said. I think that makes a lot of common sense. I make no apologies, Chair, for being incredibly parochial when it comes to this item. You will know my enthusiasm for music in the park at Cripplegate, and I am really looking forward, as the voice of St John's, to being the first performer at the new stage when it comes. I'm not going to give you any guarantee what I will be singing. And maybe Fairy Tale of New York has transferred to Fairy Tale of St John's, but who knows? Because it is really a dream come true for many St John's people to have this facility, potentially, hopefully, coming to St John's. A couple of questions, if I may, though. The issue about the Sons of Rest. I'm pretty certain, I'll correct it if I'm wrong, but I think there are a number of restrictions about its potential use. Can I have some explanation or confirmation about that? That there's certain limitations on what it can actually be used for from the covenant when it was first established. If you don't know the answer to that now, I'm more than happy to have a written response about that. And the issue regarding the requirement for us to get this in on time, and I don't want to be horrible here, but if Mr Blake would suddenly fall under that bus on Monday morning, have we got assurances that we can still get this application to the government on time for Friday? It's all backed up and ready for us to go. I don't want that bus to be anywhere near you. Please keep yourself safe if you can. And finally, the issues which Councillor Norfolk raised about other play aspects in Cripplegate Park. St John's members don't like surprises, so please can we be involved at an early stage? I know that's a separate issue, but we would really like to be involved at an early possible stage in helping develop what's coming in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So the first question, I don't know the answer in terms of any restrictive covenants, so we will take that away and come back to you on that particular point. The second point, I'm merely the conductor, you know, in all of this. I've got an orchestra of staff who do all of the hard work, and Shane's back from annual leave next Wednesday, so he and on a serious point, the very last thing we have to do with the submission is Shane has to sign it off as a programme that offers value for money with his signature before it goes in. So Shane and I are working, you know, together to make sure it goes in. I just checked today with the department on the email address for the submission because it wasn't included in the email that they sent us when they told us we got the money. Pardon? Oh, it's an email submission. Yes, it's an email submission. And then the final point, if I may, Chair, on the subject of value for money, we have commissioned an independent cost-benefit ratio report, and we got the draft of that today. And the overall programme delivers 2.3 to 1, so £2.3 for every pound invested. And the DLUC appraisal guide suggests anything between 2 and 4 is considered high value for money. So I have a meeting with the department tomorrow, just to keep them abreast of how things are going, so there are no surprises at the last minute. So that particular element, I'm pleased to say at the moment looks like a good outcome, and it will allow Shane in his 151 role to sign this off as offering good value for money when it goes in next Friday. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've talked around the limitations of this quite a lot this evening, and I think what we really need is a Time Lord. I'm sorry, David, but you're no use to us in that respect. You know, we needed to stretch the time, which we can't do, and with the result that there are a number of things we would have liked to do that we can't. And one of the things that I would have liked to see would be more things for young people, because we don't really have a vibrant youth culture. And I've mentioned this before, but this city really doesn't do that for young people, and it's not accessible at neighbourhood level, which it would need to be if we were doing that. So in those neighbourhoods where young people really don't have any access much to culture and the arts, they're still not getting it. So what I'd like to see in the future is some kind of acknowledgement of that and some kind of work done on it once we get past this point, to see if we can improve things there. Some of the things we might be able to improve here, I do think that a change in places toilet at MAG would be a very good idea if we could achieve it. I know the building is historic and all the rest of it, but we've managed to do it in historic buildings before, and to make our offer accessible. And I think one of the things we're trying to do here is make all of this as accessible as possible. And the other thing is, have we really put enough money into the Swan? Do we know that it will do what they want it to do? Because I think we were very uncertain about that last time we spoke.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think you and I have spoken about the need to provide additional amenities for young people, and I agree entirely. And as you say, we are somewhat limited by the constraints of the briefing that we've received for this. I think I said this before, and I'll repeat it anyway. I think what we're planning to do with the Scala as an arts centre will go some way in the city centre to providing something for young people. But I agree with you, it won't go far enough and it won't reach out far enough across the city. But I think, and I hope it will go some way. The change in places toilet is a very good point. The cost that we've got to now for that facility in the parks is 6 figures. It is not a cheap solution. And I think as much as we would like to do it, we haven't got the money within the budget, within the Museum and Art Gallery at this stage, to be able to cover that one off. And there was a third point you made. I'm sorry, I can't remember your last point. Ah, sorry, yes, if I may. So when we decided to recommend to members not to proceed with the Pitchcroft proposal and the stage proposal, we had to put significant additional funding towards Scullyvelt and Cripplegate. What we also did is then look at those projects where we thought that the risk was still high because the projects had not been developed far enough at this stage, or rather within the time allowed. And one of those was the Swan. So there's been an increase from the last report to this report of £50,000 for Swan Theatres. And I've spoken to Sarah Jane about that because we were just very concerned that they'd not had the structural engineers visits, they had the lift engineers visits, but there were some known unknowns, if I could put it that way. So we have increased the contingency on the Swan significantly, and the amount of funding that we are hoping to make available, should everything go to plan and we get through the process, is significantly more than the original allocation that the Swan sought from the council.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of time and there are still 2 people to speak and this is only our first agenda item. So very, very quickly, please.
Yeah. As you know, I'm a cooperative councillor, and one of the things I'm keen on is inward investment into our community from key stakeholders. And we have a lot of big businesses, we have a huge university and all the rest of it. Is there any way that we can actually get them to buy into some of the things we're doing in addition to this, so that we can get accessibility, for example?
Possibly. Do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Some members will be aware that in our 3rd year of the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Strategy, Accessible Worcester is a priority work stream, and it will be going on the scorecard and the work programme for the Health and Wellbeing Committee. And I've spoken previously at Policy and Resources Committee about that project having a number of strands, including convening conversations with the other big organisations in the city, which would clearly include the university and the county council. So yes, absolutely, it's on the agenda. It will come through committee, it will come through health and wellbeing primarily. It's outside of the remit of this specific project, but what we have done is, as you can see, very much consider the EDI strategy and some of the investment choices that we've recommended here.
Okay, I've got Jessie next.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me in this position? There's a lot I like about this project and about this bid, and one of the things I like the most is that I can't see that millions will be spent on consultants, which is great. I love the fact that every project is spread around the city to institutions that are already providing a service, and they have very clear ideas how beneficial the money would be. And yes, I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made by my colleagues about that perhaps this is not the way to do levelling up. And I know we all know the politics of this and how perhaps many hope that this will resurrect the idea of a theatre. However, I've never had a conversation with anybody in the doorstep who wanted a theatre. And the most comment I got was, why can't some money be spent on the Swan? Which is why I'm so pleased to see that the Swan Theatre is getting some money. And I'm especially hopeful for the plans to spend on the mezzanine at the Corn Exchange building. because I can see the potential to bring revenue into the city through the food and beverage provision. Hopefully that will enable the city to continue to support other forms of art that might not necessarily generate income. So I'm hugely supportive of this bid. There's one little bit that I'm perhaps a little worried. It's with the acquisition of the new building in the Angel Place, just because of our experience in buying all the buildings. And I know that we can only be as sure as we can possibly at this stage. But all I'm seeking is reassurance that we'll keep a close eye on that specific project to ensure we don't run into similar problems. And if we do, that we might be able to relocate resources from that particular project to other projects, perhaps to enhance provision elsewhere.
We have agreed heads of terms for the acquisition of the property. So we're as until obviously there's always an opportunity, but at the moment we're as sure as we can be that with agreed heads of terms we can proceed to acquire the property. Thank you.
Okay, last but not least, Karen Louie.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to focus on arts and music, in that, you know, we know that the government has not valued the arts and music and their lack of funding over the past decade. And in fact, what we're risk at doing is making it, music particularly, children will only learn it when their parents can afford to pay, which is something that creates an extremely unequal society. But also, they don't recognise that music and the arts can be part of a broad and enriching curriculum for many children. And in the context of the lack of funding for schools, when they're looking at real pressures within their funding, this bus that's being provided, I think, is going to help with the patchy distribution of music that is being delivered across state schools. But also the bandstands, having, you know, music in a park that is open to anyone, completely free, is great. And the new community aspect of the Scala as well, where it, you know, and the schools for the library is all about access for everybody to the arts and music. So to me, there is a part of this that is about levelling up, and those are the bits that I value the most. So that's really a comment, so thank you. The two questions I've got are just to seek reassurance, really. With the March 31st, 2026 deadline, how does that, for members who haven't been here and talking about Scala overall, how does that marry up with the overall Scala programme and deadline? And then for the legal and governance, we are looking at doing legally binding agreements with the people who are delivering projects on our behalf, and what do we see as the risks there, please? Thank you.
Okay, the first one with regard to the Scala, as you know, we are planning to bring a report back to members in July with regard to the construction and the business plan for the Scala. And we're working in parallel at the moment with the mezzanine so that the timetables can cohere and we therefore don't create a delay in the Scala, or the Scala work conversely gets in the way of the mezzanine. And it will be the same construction partner that is doing both jobs. So we're not going to suggest even that we would bring in a different partner. So that will de-risk the project to a certain extent. I'm being slightly nervous because obviously it's been rather tortuous in terms of the Scala in some elements. So I think we're doing as much as we can to de-risk it and make sure the two elements work together. I think there was a second point, sorry. Yeah, go on. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. It's always fantastic when someone's read all the legal and governance imps of the reports. So in relation to grant funding the outside bodies, it's a slightly different picture across the board in terms of risk. So for example, in relation to the Seven Arts Music Bus, that's a simple grant agreement with a permitted use long stop in terms of the amount of time we are required to report on outcomes and outputs, which we pass that obligation on to them. But obviously, it's very demonstrable, isn't it? Have you bought a bus and are you using it in Worcester? In other scenarios, it is a bit more complex because they're small organisations, and it wouldn't be reasonable for the council to withhold the funding, they will have a cash flow issue in their construction budget otherwise. So undoubtedly, we'll have to put them in funds up front for them to be able to let works contracts. So I think the best mechanism is one perhaps outside of the legal arrangement, which is that we have a project management resource that the partners trust. And I take the point about spend on consultancy, but it is always necessary to have spend professional fees on consultancy to make sure that you have that employer's agent relationship and the right choices are being made about subcontractors and supply chains and so forth, because that's where the difficulties will come in. Yes, there will be grant agreements in place with all, but we will need to cash flow fund some of these projects up front, and undoubtedly, therefore, the risk becomes one of project management, construction experience and delivery.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to officers. There is a huge amount of work here and a wide range of projects that will impact on many communities, many parts of the city, and as you can tell from the range of conversations and engagement, that we kind of all feel we've got an interest within it. We have got the benefit of learning from the previous projects. I think officers have been scarred by, learnt from some of the things that we have been doing, which is helpful. I just want to kind of reiterate, this grant is capital funding, and with, quite tight government strings as to what we can do with it. We can't buy staff with it, we can't do sport with it. There were other projects that we really wanted that were on the shelf, ready to run, but are not allowed. So well done to officers for getting us this far. So to come to the recommendations on the report, it's to, are we happy with the 11 projects in this updated, amended list, and happy to delegate authority to the managing director and team in case he encounters a bus.
Not the electric one.
In consultation with chair and vice chairs of the committee. So all those in agreement. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, agenda item 6, Scala and Corn Exchange, procurement of food and beverage operator and progression of mezzanine design.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce this item. So members will be aware that the Scala and Corn Exchange as a project is under the scrutiny of this committee, and there is a very substantive item scheduled for the end of July to consider, amongst other things, a potential to let a construction contract and consider the business case for the Scala operating model. This is therefore an interim report insofar as all it is seeking is authority to start a procurement for a food and beverage operator from the Scala Arts Centre, because under our constitution, any procurement that could exceed the current EU thresholds, soon to be the UK procurement law thresholds, any higher value procurement requires a committee mandate to start the process. In this instance, we're recommending that the decision ultimately on appointment of the operator will itself come back to committee. We don't ordinarily do that, but on this project we will bring that back. So this is just a permission to start the procurement. And also in recognition to the previous item that we've just discussed, subject to the government's decision on levelling up, we may now be able to progress the mezzanine works, which we were previously unable to do. And therefore, in order to keep pace on the timetable and factor these works into a construction contract, should that be the way the project progresses, we're also asking for authority to continue works up to the end of REBA Stage 3 and submit planning documents to secure a non-material amendment to the Corn Exchange scheme, and that's necessary because the Corn Exchange is a listed building. Chair, I don't propose to go through the report in much detail. I think members will have read it and understood the point that's being made in there, that we have taken external advice from a consultancy who has expertise in food and beverage, as well as working with members of the Creative Consortium who have themselves experience of running venues and working with food and beverage operators. And so that has shaped the sort of potential criteria and objectives that we're looking for, but also the recognition that having done quite a bit of soft market testing and engaged with different potential operators, there are a number of things that operators might want to do with the space, and there are different proposals already come forward through the informal route, and so therefore we think it's timely now to put it into a formal process, so that in time for the July decision, whilst the procurement won't be complete, we should hopefully by then have some indicative bids, and we can speak with more confidence about what that might do to the overall business plan. Chair, I'm going to pause there. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on this item? Alex?
Yeah, thank you for the report. There's just a couple of quick comments. One, I think this is another good example of how local government funding is messed up by central government, that we have to take a punt on doing design so that we have everything lined up for the procurement. And I know there has been a lot of concern expressed before about the Scala and the core market being a revenue drain on the council, and I think having the full kitchen and the mezzanine available will help it be a lot more successful and a lot less of a drain on the council's resources going forward, or even hopefully revenue generating.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Yes, I mean, I completely agree that it is going to be an important part of the overall Scala performance venue and what will be on offer there. So do we know, with regard to Levelling Up 3, when when the submission's going in, do we know when we're likely to hear that it's full steam ahead? Because I guess, for the food and beverage operator, as to whether they're going to have access to the mezzanine or not is quite an important consideration.
Chair, David and I'll cover that between us. Just to say in relation to the procurement, we wouldn't expect the procurement to be concluded by July. We'd expect to be providing members with a confidential briefing about the progress of that, because we'd want to get to a sort of preferred bidder or one or two bidder stage to progress some of the design work a little bit further. So I see this process running across the summer. If the decision is taken in July that we continue with the Scala project in a form like this, then I see the procurement for the food and beverage being something that takes a number of months. So July being the first milestone in that. And so I think that's comfortable with the Levelling Up timetable. The indication from government was July, David, but I don't know if we've got any further update.
Thank you, through you, Chair. When we originally had the good news, we were told that it was going to be a light touch appraisal process. I was in touch with the department today, as I said a moment ago, just making sure I got the right email address. Even the smallest details have to be checked, believe me. And the response I got from the team within the Levelling Up team was that we will give you the email address by the end of the week, because the actual appraisal is going to another part of the department, and if we are successful in getting through the appraisal hurdle, it will then go back to the team that we've been dealing with up until now for the subsequent development phases. I did groan somewhat when I read the email, and I'm just hopeful that the development phases are not too onerous. With some trepidation, I'm hoping that it will be relatively light touch, and by July, August time, we will have the green light. It may be slightly amber by then, we'll see. Thank you.
we wait with bated breath for the department to get its act together and look at the wonderful works that you are going to submit to them. So the recommendation we have in front of us is about authorisation to start procurement for a food and beverage operator for the Scala Arts Centre, noting that the final recommendation for the preferred operator and terms will come back to this committee for approval and then to start progressing design of the Corn Exchange mezzanine in anticipation of receiving a Levelling Up Fund grant award. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Agenda item 7, Q4 annual performance report and sort of outturn of the year. So who's doing this one?
Thank you, Chair. This is the normal quarterly report that's received by this committee, comprising the KPIs and the specific project reports. Mindful of the length of the agenda today and the time, so I don't propose to go through the report in detail. I'm sure you will all have read it, but therefore happy to take any particular questions.
Thank you very much. There's actually quite a lot of information in it and of importance. I think there will be some questions. Don't be shy. Right, I saw Karen first, then Louis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to talk about the planning metrics. Obviously, one of the problems with the offlog is looking back for 2 years, and we know that our service has transformed. And actually, I think it's quite demoralising for officers to see that they... I'm on the proposed scorecard.
Sorry, we're on agenda item 7, which is the performance report for the year that's just come to an end.
Oh, sorry. They're out of order. Yeah.
Oh.
I think the problem, Chair, is that the agenda
Is the wrong way round.
the report follows the SCARA, is the proposed scorecard.
Yes, that's right. But I'll hold off.
Okay, well, I'm working with the bits of paper, and I'm the right way round, aren't I, Julian?
I hope so.
So I think Julian and I agree that agenda item 7 is the Q4 and annual performance report for 23-24. So that is for the civic year that has just come to a close. So we have a number of annual indicators that actually we only see once a year. And that's the item to look at now.
Just to help members there, the report we're talking about is page 27 in the public reports pack.
So I've got Louis. Are you commenting on the right thing, or are you hanging fire? Yes.
I'd like to ask a little bit more information about the city centre transport plan. I know it was agreed last year, but what we don't want to see is a report that we spend a lot of time and money on to agree, just sitting on a shelf somewhere gathering dust. So it is still on this scorecard, it's still there. So at some point, I guess we'll have to take it off this list, but I guess we can't until, I guess, LTP5 happens, because that's where presumably it will be brought in, and hopefully some elements will be adopted by the County Council transport plan. I'd just like a bit of a comment really on if there are any ongoing dialogues with the County Council, or if they're just ignoring it.
Through you, Chair. It is rather a complex matter at the moment, because we were expecting that some of the recommendations in the city centre transport strategy would be included within the forthcoming LTP5. And there were discussions taking place, meetings in train to make sure that that was the case. However, with the demise of HS2, the government has reallocated a significant amount of funding to local authorities for transport priorities. And in Worcestershire, the County Council have been given £209.6 million over 7 years in lieu of the national HS2 strategy. Now, my understanding is that that allocation, and sorry, just to add, and the County Council have to produce an investment plan for that 209 million. I can never remember if it's 206.9 or 209.6. I think it's the latter, but I'm sure you'll forgive me for a couple of million either way. So the county have to produce a delivery plan for that money by the autumn of this year. And in the great scheme of things, 209 million over 7 years is not a lot of money, to be honest. However, it seems to me, as far as I've been told, that that plan has superseded LTP5. So the priority now is to set out the delivery plan of the 209 million rather than produce an update of LTP4, which would have been LTP5. I hope you're with me on this. So my priority now is to go back to LTP4 and see the projects that were included within that were unfunded and make sure that they are then included within the county's programme for the expenditure of the 209 million. And going back to LTP4, there were two projects. One was Shrub Hill, and the other one I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm afraid. But I've also spoke to County about including air quality action planning as part of that 209 million. So I'm currently trying to get a meeting with County to sit down and discuss how the outstanding projects within LTP4 can now be included within the 7-year transport plan. So that's the county part of it. There is another element that will remain on our scorecard list, and that is because within the transport strategy, the city centre transport strategy, there were elements that relied upon the county council to deliver, the things I've mentioned that were in LTP4. However, having said that, there are some things that are within the gift of the city council to deliver. So Lloyd and I, for example, have been talking about parking within the city, for example. So it will need county engagement as the Highways Authority, but there are things within the plan that are within our gift. So I've asked officers to develop and bring forward an action plan for the City Council that sets out what we can do within the transport strategy. So there are two work streams. One working with the council, county, to see what they can do around the 209 million, and in parallel with that, our own delivery plan to work out and set out what we can do ourselves in delivering some of the aims and objectives within the city centre transport strategy. Hope that's a comprehensive enough answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that is a really interesting update because, as to exactly where that is going and what level of progress there hasn't been in terms of moving it forward. The city centre transport strategy is really important for this city, and I think a number of us a lot of us are watching it very closely, and it has implications in a number of aspects. In fact, so it is actually going to be, as a project, moving across to Policy and Economic Development Committee, is my understanding. That's what it says here. Yeah. I do wonder, though, whether it would be useful, particularly with new councillors, if the actual transport strategy could be sent out afresh, so that rather than people trying to find it somewhere on the website, if it could be sent out either to all councillors, but especially members of PED, that would be really
we'll make
helpful.
sure that we send around our city centre transport strategy.
Yes, please, so that then everybody can have access to it and understand the parameters, because within it, there are other decisions that we're making, there are other projects, and I think we want to make sure that other decisions are aligned with what that city centre transport strategy says. Thank you. Right, I've got Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick observation and one question. So I was really pleased to see in the scorecard that the average processing time for housing benefit and council tax support claims are massively down over the last year, because that must be an extremely anxious time for anybody who's having to apply for either of those things. So the massive improvement in those times is really helpful. And on the Performance Arts Centre in the Scala project in the scorecard, it's got the due date still remaining on there as the 31st of March 2025. Is that realistic that that's going to get completed in that timescale?
That's the deadline for the expenditure of the government funding. So we have to hit that deadline in terms of spending the money. Yes. As realistic as we can be in terms of doing it. Yes.
The requirement is to have something shiny before a general election. Did you not realise?
So, sorry, Chair, I'm just conscious, obviously, we can catch members up on any particular project. Just on this one, we're hitting a government funding time deadline. That doesn't necessarily mean that's coterminous with the end of the construction programme. There are ways in which those can be two different dates.
Thank you for the clarification. Yes.
I should have said that we won't have the ribbon cutting ceremony by that date. That is planned for later in the year.
Thank you, Chair. On the Community Skills Towns Fund topic, can I just confirm that that's the construction provider we're talking about through Platform, not Platform, Worcester Communities Trust, and therefore the building blocks either at Warndon and in Dines Green?
Yeah, yes is the answer to that.
Jabba?
I think my questions have been answered, Chair. But just no, on the issue of what Councillor Mace raised, I was going to make a similar point in terms of commending the officers to making sure that enough support was available during the universal credit handover, so to speak, or switch, or the big switch. We still don't know the full outcomes and implications of what the universal credit will do to our residents, but the support is there, and hopefully that continues for a lot longer, so we can fully understand the implications of what universal credit is going to do into the community. I mean, the other point I really wanted to make was around community skills, and just going back on that point, that it being a red rating for a number of items now, in terms of that, understand the situation with the building block, but whether a more in-depth review of that programme is needed.
I think if members wish that, then we can do that. If members want a greater coverage of that particular project in the future, then that's fine. We can put it on the agenda for the future.
Yeah, I think there are sort of some concerns at the rate of progress, and it does impact on a number of communities. So we would be keen to see more, I think. Karen, did you want to contribute?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking at the two aspects that are in the report. One to do with sickness absence and then the training for staff, which are both red rags. And I suppose I'm looking at it from a health and safety point of view. Like, are we making sure that we are safeguarding our staff when we've got, and we don't have 100%. It says there's a really good narrative actually about customer service excellence, which I'd just like assurance that the manual handling, personal safety, fire safety, safety guarding is all being delivered as much as possible. But also the aspect of staff sickness that is related to stress, I think is really worrying. And obviously it's been a very difficult time for a lot of people. And I'd just like to know what we're doing to support staff, please.
Through you, Chair, just taking them in reverse order. So the JCSE committee in the last civic year, I would say municipal year, civic year, in the last municipal year, received a report in the confidential session about stress, sickness-related absence, what measures we have in place to manage stress. Much of that information doesn't have to be shared through the private channels of JCSE and could be circulated to this committee. So I'm happy to recirculate the report that I sent to JCSE that showed the kind of policies and the measures we have in place. In a very small workforce, one or two differences of people can make a big difference to percentages. What I would want to reassure you about, again, in the public session is there's a difference between stress and work-related stress. And I would want to just draw your attention to the fact that even stress as a reason for sickness does not necessarily mean work-related stress. Overall, our sickness absence figures do remain low for the sector, but we do have a very operational workforce. And in our operational workforce, we do carry a number of injuries, and that does impact on our sickness absence rates. So there's more detailed trend data that I would be happy to provide. I think probably the best way forward in terms of kind of managing the confidentiality is if I share the general report, and then if anyone wants to have an individual question with me through PNR, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much. I don't see other hands up. Thank you to officers. I mean, there is an enormous amount of work that lies behind each of these indicators, and I'm very mindful of that, and really pleasing, I think, to see the customer service figures, which are excellent, and customer service across a whole range of services, which is absolutely to be welcomed. And yeah, the improvement in housing benefit claims, which is a huge improvement now that actually we've kind of brought that service back in-house, essentially. Thank you. So we're happy to note the report. Yep, noted, commented upon. I don't know about anybody else. I'd welcome a comfort break. So we can either have a sort of 5 minutes and switch off. Yeah, I see nods. Can we do that? There we go. Thank you. So we're now on to agenda item 8. So this is the proposed committee performance scorecard for the forthcoming year. So we did have some discussions and conversations at our previous meeting. This is now refined approach to hopefully take forward.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Before we get into the detail, Lynn's asked me just to say a couple of words, and I'll try and keep it short for once, around Offlog. So this is the new department that is referenced in a number of the PIs, has been set up by the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. Reference has already been made to the fact that the published data on the Offlog website in a number of cases is pretty much out of date in terms of its viability or its value. Offlog has 3 roles: to inform, to warn and support. Those are the 3 things it is to do. In terms of inform, and this is the department's view, not mine. The reason for the inform component is at the moment it's too difficult for citizens to know how good councils are compared to other councils, and therefore they want to have a publicly available website of performance indicators where citizens can go to determine how well their local council is performing. And what my notes here are from a discussion I had with Josh Goodman, who's the chief exec of Offlog. The idea is to prompt questions and not to raise judgments, and that particular element's already been blown out of the water by the fact that the Times newspaper recently published, they took all of the Offlog figures and turned it into a National League table, and then published a league table of where every local authority sat in terms of the indicators, some of which are 2 years old, and where there was an indicator that wasn't applicable to a local authority. So, for example, around adult and children's services, which is not applicable to a council like ours, they took the average of the country and applied it to us, just to fill the box in. So it caused significant consternation amongst the councils, and the LGA has written a very, very stern letter to Offlog and to the department, to the Secretary of State, regarding that we knew this was a risk, we knew it was coming. Very, very unfortunately, neither the department nor Offlog have offered any comment on the situation. So it's a real issue for us in that respect. The warn element is to determine where there are council failures in leadership, governance and culture. And the issue here, of course, is that as Shane mentioned during the induction meetings, there have been a number of very high profile failures amongst councils, and those have not been picked up in the current corporate peer challenge process that's run by the LGA. So the department clearly think that there is a more rigorous process required. Offlog will provide an early warning system. When we raised the question of the data being out of date, we were told that they do have background data that they use, which is more up to date, and they will be looking at soft intelligence. And for that, they mean things like rapid turnover of senior staff and rapid changes in reserves, for example. And if they regard the situation as serious, they will then instigate a visit, for want of a better phrase, to the local authority to carry out a review. And so it's really, really important that, as best we can, we have full visibility of the indicators that Oflog are using to judge our performance, so that none of us get a surprising phone call one day to say, well, we're on our way because of this, that or the other. So it's really, really important that we understand the Oflog measures as best we can, and they're up to date as best we can, and we understand what that means. And the support element is that very last bit, where they will look to provide resources to local authorities that are in the warning category, so to speak. So it's really important that we understand these, and we keep a very close eye on them to make sure that we don't get any nasty surprises at some point in the future. The final point I would make is this is the first tranche of measures that they've developed. They are continuing to develop and increase the number of measures across every area of the organisation. So this is their very first stab at a series of indicators, and these will grow over time to form a significant portfolio of performance indicators for the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's a helpful explanation, I think, because unless you're a reader of the Times newspaper, I think this report today is the first time that Worcester people have actually sort of seen the measures that Oflog have got on us, so to speak, and actually how they'll be seeking to measure this council, which is a tiny subset of everything that we do. So, yeah. So any questions, comments? Yeah, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, with the Oflog for planning, one of the things I wanted to say was when the government looks at speed, they are not always valuing quality. And what we have in our service at the moment, I'd say, is officers who are trying to achieve quality in very tight timescales. And I think the problem is when you look at metrics like this, it really isn't saying enough about like the planning service. When you're saying, you know, the percentage of things in 8 weeks or 12 weeks, it's not really getting across the complexity of some of the planning and the negotiation that goes on with applicants to improve the quality of schemes before they even get to a planning committee or get to be decided on. So I do think it's a shame, and I just wanted to say that really. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, just wanted to note that, thank Councillor Lewin for her comments and note that the Planning Committee receives an annual report on its performance, which it will receive at the July meeting, and that will look back at the 12 months that have passed, and that will be both quantitative and qualitative, as it has been before. But I'm pleased to report that against current Oflog metrics, we are scoring very well. So quantitative as well as qualitative is now in a good place. So that will come to July, and it goes to PED on the routine PED scorecard every meeting as well.
Thank you very much. I've got Pat and then Jabba.
Thank you. I think when you look at the 21-22 performance of the planning service, it was perhaps not as good as it now is, and a great many improvements have been made since then. And I think Sian can confirm that the governance issues have greatly improved. So, you know, we're a bit more confident about that. It's not that we couldn't improve further. I'm sure everybody knows that there is always more that you could do, and that you're limited only by your resources and your energy. And that so far, I think that those have been available. We've got an excellent team in place, and I have a lot more confidence in the management there. So that's one thing. But also, I'm the retiring chair of JAP, which considers the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review. I can share with you that we are now we've decided that communication could be improved. There is a great deal that's confidential about JAP, but we are planning to put out a newsletter for the benefit of members so that you feel that at least you're updated on a number of issues that we can share. And also that the delays to the development plan review have in a large part been due to things like COVID and the delay to things like the transport report and so forth. And at the moment, I can say that things are on track, that not only is the review with the government inspector, we have received questions in return. Our officers are working hard on those, and that we expect to actually have most things in place by October. We don't have a date for the examination in public yet, so it's kind of watch this space. That's pretty much, I think, what you need to know, is it? But do ask if not.
Thank you very much for that update. Do you want to add anything, Sean? That's fine. Thank you. I've got Jabba next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, if you remember a few meetings ago when we were talking about Oflog, and I did warn about jokingly about a good schools guide for councils, and a good schools guide, and you know, lo and behold, that's what's been published, and for lack of context and lack of information behind that, you know, people just look at the bottom line of the numbers against a charge and judge accordingly. I mean, interestingly, in our member induction yesterday, our Section 151 officer told us of, you know, the safeguarding in place, and that if he ever thought that if he were in a bad place, that he'd be writing to us in terms of that. Maybe that should be included, you know, warning letters from the Section 151 officer be included in there as to the general health of a city council. I mean, you know, the members of city suggested the subjectivity and the context behind a lot of these measures aren't evident and in there, and so we've got to be careful how we are able to present these out in the general public and make sure that they understand the logic behind them and how they're actually calculated. I mean, going back to, I mean, and of course, certain measures are you know, statutory, and we've got guidelines to meet those measures. Now, I have to say I've disagreed with some of the comments being made in terms of certainly planning in terms of that, and some of the expectation that's been set by our statutory one, and what that perception is out in the general public and amongst our business community. You know, one of the things I think we do need to know, we are in a much better place than we were before. Granted, we've got a good set of officers around us that are working and keeping us on track, but there, you know, we're still not up to that expectation, I think, out in the general public, and amongst the business community, of where we should be in terms of doing that. How do we change that? Furthermore, on that specific point, is if we are to realise our development goals in the amount of housing that we need to build, in terms of development and industry that we need to attract here, then that goes hand in hand with our planning department and all our other departments to ensure that there is a smooth transition as can be in terms of us being able to realise those goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex?
Yeah, it was a question on a couple of the metrics in the report, and one proposed one to get rid of. So the percentage customer feedback responses, we had apparently just 8 customers in the last quarter measuring our responsiveness, politeness and helpfulness, which was 0.05% of all contacts. I was wondering, is that a useful thing to be tracking? Because it doesn't seem to be a statistically significant amount of people to be reporting on. And the other one was the metric to drop the metric for average time to fill a vacancy, because that seems like a reasonable proxy for how attractive an employer the city council is. Is there any other way we measure that?
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to tackle the vacancy question. Thank you for notice of that. So it does, at face value, does seem like a good proxy. However, it's subject to too many extraneous factors, as we've discovered as we tried to measure it over the last couple of years. Measuring that doesn't take account of the delay that other employers may introduce in sending back their references, or where we're having medical clearance on an operational post. Those things, of course, would elongate the time it takes to appoint into the vacancy, because we're counting appointment as offer letter made. So we found that there were too many, as I say, factors outside of the council's control that were leading to that measure just not being meaningful in any sense. We've discussed it. I mean, the overall approach, as members will recall previously, was to try and reduce the amount of PIs to something that we felt slightly more manageable across the committee system. I know that debate's been had and members have expressed their view, but we were at something like 130 PIs, I think. But if the committee wanted to reintroduce a PI around this, then my proposal, if you want to measure something like attractiveness of the council as an employer, it would be binary and more simple to measure something like amount of posts that are filled on the first round of recruitment. That would be a more absolute measure than time to actually appoint into a vacancy. So, I mean, if members feel strongly and they want that back, then that would be a way to progress that if you wished. In relation to the other PI around customer satisfaction, I'm not au fait with that one myself. I don't know if we need to take that one offline, David, or...
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, I'm just scrolling madly to find the one, because it was in the you're referring to the indicator in the previous report, aren't you? And it's the previous report. I think we'll take it away and have a look at it. You're absolutely right. Statistically, it's a very, very small number, but customer, it would be more qualitative than quantitative in terms of the feedback, and sometimes, in my experience, a small number of qualitative returns is equally valid in terms of, compared to a large number in terms of a quantitative survey. But we'll take it away and have a look at it and see whether it's worth continuing. Thank you.
I'm afraid I've got 4 questions for you. Okay. The first question is on these metrics. Can I ask who and when these targets were actually set? Because I'd just like to know whether that was the officers did that by themselves, or who was it from the political side who were involved in that? That's the first question. Second question is, when will we as councillors get a chance to update and put our input into future targets? And what is the correct time for us to do that? My third question is about the perennial problem about recycling rates, and the city is obviously quite low in Worcester. So from the report, obviously it was 34% target, and now it's 35%. And if, as it says in the report there, similar local authorities 38.4. Question is, why can't we be like the rest of similar local authorities? That's the third question. And the fourth question is, I guess, really about these targets are all very well and good, but they're sort of quite, they feel to me quite like management type of targets rather than truly strategic targets. And I think most world-class manufacturing businesses wouldn't have an annual target by itself. They would also have sort of a true north, a target which they were aiming to do perhaps in 5 or 10 years in the future. So we have a strategic vision of what we're aiming for the future. And I don't see that in these targets. And I think that I'm not asking us for us to adopt them now, but I think it's certainly something we should be looking to do in the future, so we can see the vision and the direction of where our ambition is for the future. Not short term, 1 year, but 5 years, 10 years, so we know where we're going and what sort of strategic directions we need to be looking at for the future. So there's 4 questions for you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think in terms of how the targets are generated, I think it's been an iterative process over the last few years. So every year at the beginning of the new financial year, we look back and review the targets, and like we're doing now, and decide whether some of them remain valid, whether we need to put in new measures, because the environment in which we operate, such as the introduction of offlog, changes, so we need to look at other things. So I don't think, so I think it's been an iterative process. In terms of member engagement in the process, that is this meeting now. So if members wish to suggest that some of the targets are not stretching enough or are not valid, or we've missed something really, really important in terms of our set of measures, then this is the opportunity to include those. I think I understand what you're saying about longer term, but I think we need to be cautious, because I think that if you look at what we've got here in front of us for this particular committee, and then multiply that across all of the committees, where each committee has a scorecard, we are tracking, measuring an awful lot of things. And one of the things that officers have tried to do is to suggest a more focused approach on what matters most, because sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees if you look at so many indicators. So I think there is a valid piece of work to be done in terms of longer term thinking, and maybe some hierarchy of measures, so we don't simply continue to add to the list. Because I think if we add to the list, it will lose focus in terms of what's most important to us. Yeah.
I think, yeah, so I think, it would be very difficult to make a target 38.6 from 34%. It seems to be quite a big jump. But that's, I think, why you need that longer term vision. You say, look, actually, in the future, we would like to be at, say, 40% or 38% or whatever. So we see that as written down as a target, and all the employees and everybody knows that we should be working towards that. Limiting ourselves to an annual target is always going to be self-limiting. We're never going to have the ambition to really make the big changes we need to make. So that's why I would push that in the future. It'd be great, I'm not saying at this meeting, but I'd really like us to consider to change this for most of these things to have some longer term targets as well as the short term target. Otherwise, we're never going to hit or make the significant changes we need to make.
I just wanted to say I agree on that point, but I won't say any more on it in terms of recycling, because Lloyd's sitting here and it's his area of expertise. So I'd invite Lloyd, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes,
Look.
Thank you. Yes, if you think offlog was hard, you remember what the Audit Commission were like and the numbers of indicators there. But that top one, which Councillor Stevens refers to, the waste recycling rate, has been around for a long time, and I'm glad it's been commented, because it seems to me that it's a very severely lagging indicator on our performance in Worcester. But I don't actually think that going for a target of 36% over a current rate of 27.5% is anything but a challenging target. It certainly needs further work going. And the other thing about it is it's a very good example of an indicator which is all about outcomes. It's not of measuring our inputs, it's just looking at what we achieve. And to achieve a higher rate needs an awful lot of effort from all sorts of directions, and that's why it is a very valid output measure to be kept top of our list, and I expect to see some very full reports to Environment Committee in the near future.
Thank you, that's helpful. Did you want to add, Lloyd?
it's probably me covered off, Chair, as part of the conversation, but I think the direct question is, I think, was what can we do in the short term? That's something that will be picked up by Environment Committee, and as members say, I know Chair and Vice Chair, that's going to be a priority issue for them in the year ahead. There'll be natural opportunities for us to communicate and engage better with standardising collection weeks. We are mandated by government to introduce a food waste collection by the 1st of March 2026. But for me, it all boils down to why aren't people recycling more? So we as officers can presume why those reasons are. But I think the trick we've missed is talking to good recyclers, bad recyclers, understanding what makes a good recycler, and what are the challenges to those people who aren't recycling. I think once we understand that, we can then tailor a communications and engagement strategy around that. But we are committed to doing that.
Through you, Chair, thanks. Can I also add that later on our agenda, we have an item about the governance review this year, and within that paper, we've talked about a number of issues that members and officers have discussed in the past 12 months, one of which is performance data. So I think just to recognise that any decision that's made tonight in terms of starting the new year with a new set of scorecards isn't the end of the conversation, because if this is a priority for members, we can return to this as part of the governance review. And I remember a discussion about the EDI strategy, where recently at committee we were saying, so how will we measure performance in the next iteration of the strategy? So there may be something around, as you say, what are those strategic targets, key targets across strategies that each committee might own, which might be separate to management level targets. So just to note that performance data is one of the things in the governance review that we said we would look at.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I'm not really sure if this is the right moment for this, but I had a conversation with a young woman in McDonald's a few months ago, and discovered that she'd been rough sleeping in our city centre for 2 years. And speaking to the team, it seems a lot of work is being done to support this person. And it made me wonder whether it might be worth for us to look at rough sleeping, or the numbers of the people who are identified as rough sleepers within our city, because it's a good way of identifying perhaps other issues in other services, and identifying bottlenecks and things that we might need to tackle from a policy and resources perspective. It would be useful to know just how many people are long-term rough sleeping in the city centre and the city wide, and how we track them, how we measure them, and just trying to get an understanding of some of the complexities that come with that.
Thank you. I mean, as the recently retired Chair of Health and Wellbeing, that's a performance indicator that goes to that committee. So we haven't got everything here for PNR. You know, at the last round of committee meetings before the local election, each committee did look at the performance indicators that they wanted to see going forward, and there was some rationalising, but rough sleeping is within health and well-being. We can't have everything come to this committee. The off-log ones are here because it was felt that somewhere, particularly if the off-log scores are going to be used, to judge this council, that we should have sight of those. But that particular indicator, rough sleeping, is within health and well-being committee. And I've got Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just really concerned about the shift that's being imposed upon us by the creation of Offlog and their metrics. I've said it before, but it warrants saying again, I think, that the British economist Goodhart stated that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And I think we've heard some comments implying that already this evening. My concern with that is that we'll have the situation that's already rearing its head before it's properly launched, of league tables and comparing apples with oranges, and and the effect that that has not just on our place, but on our officers and staff when they're chasing down targets which we know have limited meaning for us locally and are, as I say, not comparable to other areas. So what we're doing here is entirely sensible in that we're trying to merge Oflog's diktats with, if you like, rationalising our own indicators so that officers aren't just spending their entire time counting things. So we have to do it, and this seems to be a sensible approach. What I think that we need to be really mindful of is that we don't throw out things that are of utility, which we've had some discussion about already. That we make sure that we do have a weeding process, if you like, of dropping metrics that are not of any use, so that we don't waste everybody's time in generating them and looking at them. That we have robust discussions, questioning them, such as the time to recruit and so on, as to what they're actually telling us. But also that we need to, I think, have a much bigger focus on the qualitative information that we as councillors can consider and bring to our discussions. As a counting numbers of street sleepers, is a potentially valuable thing, but the experience of street sleepers, I think, is probably actually more important. And we've heard one story this evening of that qualitative experience, and there are tools and ways in which that can be presented in such a way that it's actually really useful for us as councillors in making decisions about the direction of the council and where resources go and so on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think I'll take that as a summary of the discussion, actually. We have considered the proposed content of the scorecard, and I think, a number of kind of matters of principle and detail have been considered. So thank you to everybody's contribution. I'll move us on then to agenda item 9, Corporate Risk Management Report, Quarter 4. Who's going to talk about that? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, this is the regular report that comes to this committee. If you refer to the appendix, you can see the summary of the individual risks, the score and the trend compared to the previous report. So 3 have moved up very slightly, and the report notes the reasons behind those in terms of the changes that have happened since the last report that have prompted those. And then we have 3 reds that are again unchanged from the last report and focus on the council's financial position, in terms of the fact that we have a budget gap that we need to address for this year of 388,000, which is, given our level of our reserves, is manageable. Our challenge is that deficit in the next 2 or 3 years will continue to grow quite significantly, and we therefore need to address that, as we have done with the savings identified in the previous 12 months. Allied close to that, of course, is the local government funding. The government have been talking for some time, as in several years, about reforming business rates and so on. That still hasn't taken place, but is waiting in the wings for us in the near future. And then last but certainly not least, ICT security, where we have systems that are certainly robust, but the implications of a cyber attack, as we've seen in other councils, would be serious, and therefore it rates that highly in terms of a risk. happy to take any specific questions.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of people indicated. Richard first and then Robin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two very brief questions. First of all, something which I'm surprised is missing, but I'm hoping I'll be reassured by the answer. It's an issue about how do we monitor and manage any failures in corporate governance. That is, I would consider to be. I've seen failures happen both in the commercial world and in local government, and it causes almighty problems and concerns when it does happen. So I would like a bit of assurances about that. That is managed properly. And secondly, the question about civil emergency. I'm conscious that emergency planning is not one of our responsibilities. It belongs to County Hall, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable that we are only really aware of the risks, according to the report, or unless I've misread them, we are only really comfortable with knowing what we've already actually experienced, issues like flooding and pandemic. There are plenty of other civil emergencies which could happen. For instance, a train carrying nuclear waste derailing in the centre of the city of Worcester. That would be a significant risk, and I'm wondering what kind of correspondence and knowledge and sharing of information we do have with the emergency planners at County Hall, and whether we can take off-the-shelf guidance when these emergencies do actually happen.
Thank you. Lloyd has indicated he knows the answer.
I'll pick up the second one, Chair, around emergency planning. So, as a council, we do have a legal duty. We are a Category 1 responder. So you're right, the County Council play the lead role, but we are certainly a statutory contributor. We have a range of emergency plans that don't sit in the shelf, don't gather dust. We review them regularly. And one of those is what we call a major incident plan. So that's not just flooding, that's not just a pandemic, that is, touch wood, a plane crashing within the city, a train crash, nuclear waste or not. We do periodic testing of those plans. There's an event tomorrow regarding a major incident. So from a planning point of view, a document point of view, and from a resource point of view, I can reassure members that we are on top of the emergency plan.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Yes, it's an interesting point actually about failure of corporate governance as a risk on the corporate risk register. And there's no reason why we couldn't do that. Members of the Audit Committee will know that that's what we've been discussing at Audit and Governance Committee with a sort of new Are We Safe dashboard of different indicators, and that the Audit and Governance Committee, their work programme will be geared around that for the next 12 months. So at the last two A&G meetings, we've discussed that. What does Are We Safe look like and what would we measure? So in a sense, I suppose, what we've assumed as statutory officers is that that risk is being looked after by that committee, but there's no reason why that risk shouldn't feature on the corporate risk register. And the way we've expressed it previously, and I guess the world has moved on, we've talked about the uncertainty around the council's financial funding settlement, as opposed to the wider point about how well run it is with the money it's got. So we could very much, we're happy to revisit that. But the Audit and Governance Committee will be looking at that risk through a number of different measures over the next 12 months. And again, any member of Audit and Governance, feel free to chip in. It's a standing item now on their agenda. Chair, I'm not sure what you mean by report back, because obviously the Audit and Governance Committee will have a report at every meeting. But yeah, but we're happy to update make a corporate risk specific around corporate governance separate to amount of funding. Happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Robin?
Thank you, Chair. Can we just talk about ICT security as a risk? Glad to see that staff are becoming more aware of their role in protecting the estate, as it were. Do we have an understanding, a feel for the risk that members may present? It's a bit of a thorny project, but I don't, through work, I get that kind of awareness training, but I don't get it here, if you see what I mean. My responsibilities as a member to the IT network aren't exactly clear to me as a member.
Through you, Chair. Some members will be aware that we are keen to roll out Worcester.gov with the associated Microsoft applications during the next 12 months. So again, it'll be for members to decide if that's optional or mandatory, but to put everybody within the system will then require cybersecurity training and awareness, but it will also give us an additional level of security to detect threats that perhaps we are not able to. I'm choosing my words carefully because it's such a sensitive subject in the public domain. Obviously, when we're using a number of different web-based email addresses, that can give a number of different security risks than all being within the system. Pros and cons, undoubtedly, but if members choose to come on board with Worcester.gov and the MS Teams functionality and security settings around that, then rest assured you will all be trained and have regular cybersecurity modules to complete.
We look forward to the homework. I've got Alex.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to come back on that point about cybersecurity, because I am on worcester.gov.uk and there is already a mandatory cybersecurity module to complete in Teams, which I have already done. It was very good, so I can thoroughly recommend it.
Not sure whether that's an incentive or a disincentive to move for those of us not yet on that module, on that email address. I've got a couple of comments myself. City plan priorities, because that is, and the financial resources, that is a red risk. Okay, it remains as such. There are a number of mitigating actions which have sort of recently been agreed. Will they be coming to a future P&R agenda? So, you know, where are those action plans going to go, if I've understood that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah, so it will be coming here in due course. That's wonderful, so that we can see and endeavour to mitigate those risks. And then the other one, safeguarding. Again, there's a number of actions there. Clearly, there was a corporate meeting, wasn't there? And you sat and looked at the risk register and identified various things. So safeguarding, training, a report and so on. I'm just really conscious that it actually is a responsibility of the leader of the council to be the lead for safeguarding. So as to what point and where and how would I be involved in that, or members' involvement?
Through you, Chair, the safeguarding policy was last updated by the P&GP subcommittee, actually, within the last 12 months. It's on a related theme, we need to update the corporate health, safety and wellbeing policy with the details of the new leader. So we could easily take the safeguarding policy through JCSE in the same terms, but it has been reviewed recently by members through P&GP.
Appreciate that, but this isn't about policy, is it? This is about training, reports and a corporate safeguarding group, which presumably is the implementation of the policy, isn't it? These are about actions following from the policy.
Yes, I mean, it's being led as an officer work programme by our Head of Service for Homes and Communities. Chair, we just need to give a bit of thought to that member oversight into that, I think, and how we cover that off. But it's a very active work stream at a management officer level.
No, I think, again, sorry, Chair, my computer's just about to have a patch update, so I'm panicking. But I think as a minimum, we have the annual safeguarding report, don't we, which is our report back to members on the work of the previous year and looking ahead. And as Sian said, there's a very active programme of work around safeguarding. So we can look to see how we can play members into that on a more regular or periodic basis.
Thank you. I mean, it's about quality assurance, isn't it? And mitigating the risk, because it is a very serious risk and we are dealing with vulnerable customers and staff on occasions, of course, and others. Thank you. So, committee notes the updated assessment of corporate risks. No further comments. Okay, thank you. Item 10, insurance contract. Is that you, Mark? Thank you.
It is, thank you, Chair. This is a nice straightforward report concerning the renewal of the council's insurance contract. You'll see that the recommendations are simply that the committee notes the process and then delegates the responsibility to the Director of Finance and Resources in conjunction with the Chair and Vice Chairs to then follow the process through and let the contract. Just briefly, we've just completed a 3-year contract that actually expired in 2022, but as part of that was extended to this year. A procurement exercise therefore been undertaken, led by Wyre Forest Council. This is a contract involving a number of different local councils. And the deadline for submissions by interested parties was the 14th of May, so just a week ago. So to give some context to this, the breakdown of the annual cost at the top of page 49 is just under £320,000. And obviously that's greater than the procurement threshold. However, as paragraph 2.8 notes, as the expiry date is before the date of the next scheduled committee meeting, that's the reason why the committee is asked to delegate the responsibility so that the contract can be let. I've been in touch with Wyre Forest today to get an update on the tender position, and the positive news there is that 3 or 4 bids were received for each of the individual separate insurance lots, which is good news. Having said that, as is often the case with insurance, the premiums are increasing for a variety of different reasons, particularly in terms of vehicle insurance, and therefore we're looking at a likely increase of probably around 20%. The budget that we set for the current year did allow for that, or most of that, so hopefully we will end up with a cost that is close to the budget itself. Apart from that, I don't know if anybody has any questions.
A whole list of questions for you. Right. Got to get my money's worth.
Marvellous.
Just regarding the pooling arrangement, it doesn't place any limitations on us in terms of our ability to claim. There isn't a limit to per pot for claims. That's in terms of being in a joint in a pooled arrangement. I was just wondering whether there was a total limit for claims amongst the 3 authorities and etc. If one major incident kind of blew the budget, it wouldn't allow us not to claim. That's the first question. Second question is, what does councillor insurance cover? And the final question is, in terms of upscaling of our existing buildings or the taking on of new assets, do we have to then go back and renegotiate, or is that covered in the existing insurance premiums?
Okay, thank you. So taking those in order, in terms of the first one, the current contract certainly had no limits on the overall claims level. Like most insurance contracts, there was an excess that applies for the lower level of claims, but there were no upper limits. And as far as I'm aware, that certainly isn't the plan this time around. Your third point, in terms of new buildings, etc., as with most insurance contracts, if what you want to have cover for changes, then yes, you need to go back to when we bought some of the commercial properties that applied, and that would apply in this instance as well. But the contract would still stand, but we'd have to arrange additional insurance for those. And then the middle one, can you just remind me what the question was?
This is a reference to councillor insurance.
And where have you seen that?
Or is there not? Maybe I was dreaming.
Paragraph 2.1 talks about cover for the individual areas.
Indemnities for councillors and officers.
Oh, okay. Can include professional indemnities for council and officers. Any comment on that, Sian? 2.2, first line. Professional indemnity for councillors and officers. I mean, for officers, I think it speaks for itself that the actions of officers are therefore covered by the insurance policy.
So it's timely for me to mention actually that we have a indemnity resolution in place for all councillors, because I had a look at it earlier in the context of appointments to outside bodies. So in October 2019, full council approved a comprehensive indemnity resolution to indemnify, it says, indemnify members to the fullest extent possible in law in relation to functions carried out on behalf of the council, whether in their capacity as a councillor or appointed to an outside body. Insurance, obviously, as you know, is a means to fund such an indemnity resolution. Legally, you have that commitment from the council through that indemnity resolution. Whether we would call on our insurance to meet any claim would be the usual assessment of level of initial excess, nature of claim, and so on, like with anything else. But routinely, we have professional indemnity, and that would cover councillors as well as officers because of our indemnity resolution that's in place.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the social, environmental and economic implications of who we purchase our insurance from, because I think that we know that all financial institutions are not equal when it comes to ethics in terms of the way in which they are funded and their impact on the environment. So I would like some reassurance or understanding about how the financial institutions' track record on ethics will be factored into the decision as to which is selected to provide our insurance.
Given this is a contract that's been applied across several different councils and is being led by Wyre Forest, I can't answer that question here and now. We'll have to give you a written answer to that once I've gone back and consulted with Wyre Forest on the approach they're taking.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, so we've noted the process and delegate responsibility to the Director of Finance and Resources in agreement with Chair and Vice Chairs to agree a contract in line with the process. Are people happy with that? Is anybody against? Okay, I think that's agreed. Thank you very much. Item 11, Astwood Crematorium, replacement of cremators. A big project, big numbers, lots of recommendations.
Thank you. I've got about 11 minutes left, I think. Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible given the time of the evening, but conscious that it is a £5.5 million investment report. So just to make members aware, the report focuses on the electric cremator replacement element of the Astwood project, but obviously there's a broader project in play here. So when we refer to back of house element of the project, we mean the replacement of the cremators and the installation of a heat exchanger. When we talk about front of house improvements, we mean improvements to the chapel, the communal areas and the facade. And I'll update a little bit on the broader project shortly. So the background to this really is the existing gas cremators at Astwood are now approaching 27 years old. approaching end of life, so the risks around downtime and expensive repairs and maintenance are growing. Furthermore, in the next couple of years, our current cremators become non-compliant. They don't include mercury abatement, and they don't include any inline abatement. So there are operational and there are legal drivers for us needing to replace our cremators. Thirdly, and most critically, operating Astwood generates a surplus of £1 million for us as a council. So it plays a significant role in helping the council set a balanced budget every year. So it's critical that we replace our cremators so it can continue to provide a reliable, legally compliant service, but also help us set that balanced budget against a significant financial gap over the life of the current medium-term financial plan. So this is a critical project for the council. The report has set out the business case for replacing our current cremators with electric over gas, and we've broken the report down into several headings. So just to cover off capital cost and borrowing repayments first of all, Appendix 2 sets out the detailed costs for each option. And members will have picked up that with the council obtaining the SALEX funding grant of 1.5 million, when you net that off the overall cost of gas and electric, that actually brings the cost of electric cremator replacement out as cheaper by £500,000. So £500,000 less of capital required to bring in electric cremators. Added to that, section 9 of the report, when we look at the borrowing repayments and that, the impact on the medium-term financial plan of us going electric would be £275,000 per annum, compared to £317,000 per annum for gas, so a difference of £42,000 every year. So from a capital and a revenue point of view, electric is cheaper, but that's all based on the SALEX grant, and that SALEX grant is very much electric only, decarbonisation, and that's not just about cremators, but that's about putting the heat exchanger in as well and getting rid of the gas boilers. I'll comment very quickly on the VAT position, but if there are any questions, I will quickly direct you to Mark. We do, as a council, benefit from a partial exemption calculation, which enables us to recover VAT on the running costs of certain activities. However, given the level of income that we generate across the council, so bereavement, car parking, garden waste, we run very close to our annual exemption limit. Where that limit is exceeded, we then have to pay all the VAT on all costs relating to supplies recovered through the year. So given the scale of this project and the fact that we already run close to that limit, it means we would exceed if we move ahead with this project. And that's why in Appendix 2, you'll see we've included £900,000 of VAT. So we are planning that we will have to include that, and we've included that as part of the figures, both capital and the borrowing impact. Just in terms of capacity, we've included a section on capacity versus demand. Worst case scenario for Astwood is the winter months, where on average we need to be cremating 9 coffins a day. And the average cremating time now for an electric cremator is down to 110 minutes. So given our operating period each day, we are comfortable with the fact that we can on average cremate 9 times a day. And that also gives us a little bit of headroom as well for any sort of growth in business. And the other thing which is really important to us is that we work really well with our funeral directors. So if for some reason there is an increasing rise in demand, we can forward plan, we can manage those forward bookings by working with funeral directors. So again, from a capacity point of view, we have no concerns. As part of the project, we're also looking to include some space capacity and the sort of feed works that if we do need to bring a third cremator online in the medium term to the longer term, the basis is already there for us to do that. Energy costs, you'll have read the report, so I won't go into huge amounts of detail, but it will be cheaper for us to run electric cremators than gas cremators. Some of that is due to the fact that gas is more expensive than electricity, but substantially as well, electric cremators are more energy efficient when they get to temperature. As long as we're providing, a regular stream of cremations, it will hold temperature, whereas gas, it's a bit more up and down. So from an energy cost point of view, what has been the work undertaken to date, we are looking at revenue savings in excess of around £20,000 a year from moving to electric. Just in terms of servicing, maintenance and repair costs, again, we've set out in the report, there's very little in that between the two, certainly early on. But as the cremators sort of grow in age, the fact that temperature fluctuates less in electric cremators will mean there are less costs moving forward with servicing and maintaining electric cremators, whereas with gas there's lots of sort of issues around refractory linings, because again temperatures move up and down, so there's more stress. Obviously, the significant positive impact, if members are minded to approve tonight's report, is the environmental impact associated with electric cremators. So by moving away from gas, that will literally overnight cut the carbon emissions associated with the site, but it will also reduce by a third our NOx emissions. And as members will know, particularly those on the Environment and Licensing Committee, there's a link there to our work around air quality. But just to put into context, if we were to move to electric cremators, that would reduce the council's carbon footprint by 18%. So it really ties in with our environmental sustainability commitments. So in summary, electric cremators deliver significant environmental benefits with the aid, in line with strategy. With the aid of the SALEX grant, they will be cheaper from a capital and a revenue point of view. And over the longer term, servicing and maintenance costs will be less as well. The reason for bringing the decision to members this evening, ahead of the work, the update report on the broader project, is that we are keen to make sure that the cremator manufacturer is embedded within the design team. When you're looking at back of house and front of house, what we want to avoid is at some stage up the line, a conflict arises that leads to delays or to cost pressures. So we want to get that cremator manufacturer on board as early as possible, and we've recently appointed our multidisciplinary design team. The other imperative, obviously, is around the SALEX grant. We have to complete that work by by March 2026. So again, we need to know what cremators we're having. You know, we need to get in the queue for manufacturer, so we can get them on site and get them installed. The report sets out a little bit on regulatory permissions, and we've also started to give members a bit of a feel for the period when the crematorium will be closed. Further information will be brought back to members on that one, but it's likely that we will use an off-site facility for services, and we'll also use a fellow local authority to do our cremating for us. The work we've done to date is that the additional costs from that will probably be netted off by the fact that, you know, we'll turn the electricity off and the gas off at Astra for a period of time. So whereas we were concerned that was going to have a financial implication from us, that is now seemingly far less. And again, the reason for wanting to bring that to members, that topic in the future, is that will be critically important. The communication and the engagement strategy around that will be critical. So we will want you to see that and to have a part to play in it. And then just in respect of the broader project, as I say, the multidisciplinary design team has now been appointed, and that will take the project up to the end of detailed design stage, what we call, the end of design stage, what we call REBA stage 3. And those eagle-eyed members will have spotted that the investment that we're seeking tonight, there's a small element of that, around £220,000, that relates to work to get us to the end of that stage. So the bulk majority is on electric cremator replacement and construction of fees and surveys, but there is a small amount that takes the overall project to the end of REBA stage 3. And that will be the next decision gateway for members. We will come back in autumn. We'll present the end of design stage report to you, and at that point we will probably be seeking approval to submit a planning application for the broader project. And then to progress to stage 4, which is detailed design. And again, within the report, we've included an indicative programme to give you a feel for what that looks like. So the report tonight is asking you to approve a business case for electric cremators, to recommend an adjustment to the capital programme, or to recommend to council an adjustment to the capital programme of £5.5 million to procure the cremators and the installation costs. Note the adjustment to the medium-term financial plan of around 300,000, and approve officers to get on and procure the cremators. and we will do that and seeking delegation to sign that off with directors in consultation with chairs and vice chairs. So happy to leave that there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. A really clear explanation of what is a complex project, but a really important one for the city, that, you know, a huge impact on our carbon footprint and actually a really important service for our citizens, our residents. So I've got some queries and comments. Okay, Alex first.
Thank you. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you for officers, and you know, I'm really excited about this project, which is not something I thought I'd ever say, that I'd be excited about replacing cremators, but here we are. So when people have asked me on the doorstep about what work the council is doing to reduce its carbon output, this is one thing I always mention. I don't think any residents are ever quite as excited about me when I tell them, but it is something I always mention. The fact that the crematorium is going to become completely fossil-free thanks to the heat exchangers and its complete removal of its boilers for the heating, I think is absolutely brilliant. You know, the more council buildings we can get that don't burn any fossil fuels as part of the heating will be brilliant. I think as we will hopefully be one of the first councils with electric cremators, that will bring more business in the area for people who want environmentally friendly services for their loved ones. It's really close to my heart as it's in my ward in St Stephen. I cycle through Astor Cemetery every week with the St Barnabas bike bus. And when my wife had a miscarriage 12 years ago, we had the service and the cremation at Asperwood Crematorium, so it will always remain very close to my heart. I do have a few questions. Will the electric cremators provide enough capacity? I know you mentioned, Lloyd, about the averages. My concern is that from the table in 3.7, the max capacity for each cremator per day is 5 for a total of 10. And if we have an average of 9 per day, are we going to be able to properly cope with those peak periods? So that's the first question. Second one is, the crematorium currently operates 5 days a week for 10.5 hours a day. Electric cremators need to be kept at temperature 24/7. And I was just concerned about, do the costs properly take account of the fact that we're only going to be running cremations 5 days a week rather than 7? Third question is, will electric cremators, being relatively new and plainly the way the industry will go, are we confident that lead times on supply will match our timescales in the report for installation? And finally, with the electricity supply needing to be upgraded anyway, is it worth including electric charging point installation at the crematorium, or at least ensuring the supply can cope with it? And will supply upgrades also account for a potential third cremator in future? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we are confident that based on our worst case winter scenario that the 2 electric cremators will be able to meet demand. And as I say, we're also able to manage our forward bookings with funeral directors. You know, if that number does sort of raise above that. Secondly, the costs that have been put together are based on the operating model at Astwood. So again, I'm confident that the numbers that we've provided are based on, you know, the real situation down there. Just in terms of lead-in times on the cremators themselves, so we've had an extensive piece of work done by CDS, a consultancy company that's sort of a bit of a market leader in this area. And we've also done our own soft market testing with 2 or 3 companies as well. And the answer is consistent. The lead-in times for cremators are sort of 9 months, 10 months. So again, we're confident of that point. Your last point, Councillor Mace, I didn't quite make a note of as my computer was crashing.
It was if we're upgrading the electricity supply, because I think there's a cost in there for National Grid to upgrade the supply, is it worth including installing electric car charging points at the crematorium, or at least making sure the supply will cope with it? And will the supply upgrades also account for a third cremator?
So yes, the upgrade will account for the third cremator. It's a significant upgrade, so it doesn't just meet current demand, it meets future demand. And as part of the design phase we're currently in we can work on the provision of any electric charging points.
Thank you very much. I've got Karen next, and Pat.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. I just wanted members to know that Lynn and I went to a crematorium in Oxfordshire not so long ago, who put in an electric cremator about 10 years ago, I think. Really early adopters. It's a private company, and they chose it because they noticed that the market's changing. People are more concerned about having more environmental funerals, and actually us being the only crematorium with an electric cremator is going to be something that is really important across the area here, because we will be the only crematorium to have it. And of course, just a little comment on the building. I know because it'd be a planning application, but when we visited the site, we also saw how different the reception was and all the soft stuff. This is such a sensitive time in people's lives, and obviously the fact that we're addressing some of those issues with this project as well, I think is really important. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for saying that it is a very sensitive time in people's lives. This is a tremendous community benefit, but also, of course, it yields environmental and financial benefits. So in that sense, it's a bit of a no-brainer to me, I think. But I think I did have one question, which was, the loan period is 25 years at 300k a year, I notice. Does that also reflect the life of the cremators? Is that coterminous, 25 years?
Yes, it is.
Right, thank you. No, that's useful to know.
Robin, did you indicate, or was it Richard?
I do have a question to ask, but I didn't indicate, so...
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I know I've asked this question before, and I can't remember for the life of me. Sorry, that's a bad choice of words. I cannot remember the response which Lloyd gave. I am aware that our current cremators cannot take some sized coffins, and it's limited in what it can take, and we have to take those elsewhere. I believe these new potential cremators will be able to take all sizes of coffins. Is that correct? Which will enable us to actually do more work in-house rather than export it to another provider.
Yeah, that's correct. These will be barometric cremators.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I remember talking about cremators very early on in my career in the council. 9.2, we're required to report and monitor and provide information to SALEX. How long for, and what are the conditions where they might claw back some of the grant?
Again, I may rely on Shani, who may have the report up in front of her. I think my answer would be that we will need to report to SALEX through until the end of the construction period. I think the critical thing with SALEX is that the electric cremators are in, the heat exchanger is in, the destratification fans are in, and they are working. I think the conversations with SALEX have been really positive to date. But I think they're the three main things. If we get them in and we get them in a timely fashion, I think the risk of clawback is low. But I'll let Sian just expand on any detail.
Yes, through you, Chair, thanks. I did review the grant conditions, and they are extensive. And members will be aware that with some government grants, there's virtually no conditions, and others there's a whole book. So they are quite comprehensive, and they are standard terms as regards clawback. However, as Lloyd says, the way that the SALEX grant is structured is it's front-loaded around the expectation of putting in the infrastructure. It isn't about measuring outcomes over many years. So the clawback risk goes once the infrastructure has been purchased and installed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, a must-do project. You know, do nothing is not an option in this current circumstances, and a considerable amount of work has gone in terms of across the committee in terms of shaping this policy. And thank you to the members that went out down to Oxford and did the due diligence and find out for us and present the facts to us. That's really, really useful for us. I mean, I'll reiterate my point, which I've made several times. It's a significant project for us. It's the majority of this work will be back-end stuff. Unfortunately, it won't be, the front end. And I think there's a real opportunity here that we're putting a lot of investment in the back end without really improving the front end of it. It is Aston is a dated building, unfortunately, and if we're going to use the latest technology and bring this facility up to county-wide spec as the best in the county, then it is worth considering other works to make sure that we do give that impression out to the general public, especially if we're aiming to be able to get other business from across the county in it. One of the questions I think that was asked was regarding the electricity supply for a third cremator. Will we physically have room for a third cremator within the facility as well? And in terms of in terms of sort of the gap in service that we will have if we get this money and the project goes ahead, in terms of that, making sure that people are signposted to the right places in order to make sure that they are able to get their loved ones, cremated in the right place, and making sure that that relationship management is really, really important as a result.
Yeah, again, so just to reaffirm, Chair, as part of this project and as part of the back of house works, there will be space for a third cremator designed in, and the feed work will also be put in as part of the work. So it will just be a matter of, it sounds a bit like, sounds a bit easy, doesn't it? But it'll just be a matter of plugging in a third cremator if that time comes. And again, just to agree with Councillor Riaz, that the communication and engagement that needs to go into that period when we are not operating at Aston is critical. So we will sort of co-design that with members so that you are comfortable with it. And whether it be signposting on our website with funeral directors, face to face, we will do that to ensure that there is the least amount of impact for Worcester residents and Worcester communities during that period.
To follow up, obviously that will have an impact on our budget during those. Lord, sorry. It's okay. So yeah, it's during that downtime, so to speak, it'll have a significant impact on our budget, and obviously.
No, again, sorry, Jab, if I didn't explain it clearly. So, the work we've done to date, the additional costs in us renting space off-site to hold services, and for another location to cremate. At the moment, the forecasted costs of that will be mitigated off by the fact that we won't be using gas at Astwood. So the savings from energy costs, will mitigate the impact of the additional costs from cremating elsewhere and from holding services elsewhere.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions. If I could put on record, I mean, well done to the officers in getting the SALEX decarbonisation grant. That is a very, very significant amount of money, a really significant investment in our decarbonisation. So yeah, well done to those that filled in put the application in such that it was successful. Are people content if we take the recommendations en bloc? Everybody understands how late the hour is and how very important this project is. So all those in support? Not much further to go. Right, agenda item 12, procurement of specialist consultancy domestic food waste collection service programme development. Lloyd with no computer.
I think you just presented the report, Chair, to the title. So given some of the body language from members, if you're happy, I'll take that as read, but happy to answer any questions members may have.
Superb report. The only thing I would say is this is we have increasing unfunded statutory burdens on local authorities, and you know, this is another one of them. It's going to be quite difficult to accommodate it within the timescale that we've been told.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, welcome the investment in looking for an ideal, a report to come back to this committee and to the council in terms of outlining what options we are. Just a request that actually there are obviously councils out there that are in operation that are doing food collections. Whether we could do a similar visit to some of those authorities to understand what how far they've got in their progress, and whether food recycling rates have increased or have become stagnant, and what issues that they face. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that should be possible. And yeah, I mean, I can sort of testify, having been in sort of district and county council leaders meetings over the past year, that progress of a shared county-wide service is glacial progress, would be diplomatic, I think. Not all councils are in the same place or have the same appetite for this as we do in Worcester. I think it's also perhaps worth saying this is about domestic food collection, and the government are saying April 2026 for this. It's completely separate to commercial food waste collection, which is actually a year earlier. Clearly the kind of volume and complexity for domestic food collection is more difficult. And there are kind of huge technical implications to, and actually what the legislation says. And I do think, the government doesn't always, the present government doesn't always understand the legislation that it has passed and the implications to actually bring that law into operation. So this is a necessary investment in consultancy, and it will help us understand the costs of taking forward this service, looking toward to bring the service on, which is, I think, is something we do want to do. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, it is food waste, particularly thinking, as you're saying about the commercial, will there be metrics to work out how much food that could have been consumed by hungry people is actually going to be lost, and with a view to reducing that? I know there's moves towards supermarkets not throwing away actual edible food, and I think in France it's becoming illegal.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just being advised now that the overall item, waste collection is the responsibility of Environment Committee. What we have before us this evening is only about the procurement of a specialist consultancy, so we can move forward looking at how we might do domestic food waste collection as to supermarkets and where their food goes, and whether people throw potatoes in the bin instead of making mash is a slightly different question at this point in time. So people in agreement with procuring this, and the source of funding is from the rates risk reserve, and in the hope that we might be able to reclaim it in future as part of implementing government legislation. All those in agreement with recommendations? Everybody, hooray! Thank you. Agenda item 13, review of council's governance arrangements. We're not doing it all tonight, are we?
Thank you, Chair. At 10 o'clock tonight, who would like to discuss a review of the council's governance arrangements? But I mean, perhaps if I could just use the last item as a little example. That item was before P&R committee because it was a request to release funding from a business rates risk reserve, and the item was 33k. And we just had a brief discussion around all the policy considerations around domestic food waste, which are owned by the Environment Committee. And earlier on the agenda, we discussed matters that actually fit with health and well-being. And perhaps that isn't a problem, but it is something to discuss in the governance review, because we have a full agenda tonight, and we did discuss how we could reduce the agenda, and we concluded that we couldn't under our current governance arrangements. So there's a really nice worked example at 10 o'clock tonight. Members, I'm going to take it as read that you agree with the officer advice that it is time we do a governance review, simply because it was 2017 that we last put our governance arrangements into place. And again, just if I could give another example for anyone who's read their fact sheets from yesterday's member induction, the Democratic Services team now record that last year we had 130 member meetings. And I think if you recognise what we say in our report about the impact on the Council's work programme and on workloads of members and officers, again, I'd hope that we could just agree that it's time we looked at the workload and things like where we've ended up for plenty of good reasons, but plenty of probably diversionary reasons that certain committees have certain functions. Sometimes it's ambiguous how they fit with others. Sometimes we discuss things 3 times. One item was 20k, went through 3 committees, then went back round and went through the committee again. Those things do feel a little bit painful, I think it really should be said that Worcester City councillors give an awful lot of their time to Worcester City Council. I really think that's true. Certainly officers, we spend a lot of time in meetings too. Now, if that's what we conclude we need to do at the end of the process, well, at least we'll have done that having had a review of it. Then I think just getting into something a bit more meaty, very briefly, we had a conversation earlier about what do members want from performance. And I think that part of that also is what do members think we need to do in terms of scrutiny. And do we think in our committee system we're getting the right level of scrutiny? Perhaps we are, but perhaps we're not, and we should have a look at it. And we could get some external support in helping us look at that. And the report suggests that we don't need to get a consultant in to do everything for us. Some of this is definitely self-help, hopefully not therapy too much. But we can talk with using the mechanisms of group leaders, P&R committee, full council, like we did the Boundary Commission review. We can work in a consensus way to look at what we problem solve between us. But we may want some external support, for example, around scrutiny, and the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. They've got a bit of a sort of checklist and a kind of self-evaluation tool, scrutiny self-evaluation framework. And there's a small team at the Centre for, I still want to call them by their old name, they're the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny these days. And the LGA referred to them yesterday when they were on site. They could help us with some of this, and they could just look in from the outside and give us some diagnostics and some assessments. So I say all of that within the context of, I guess, my current assumption, which is that this is a review within the committee system, about the committee system. But even that is something that members could decide they wanted to widen out and look at other governance arrangements. At the point where members said they want to look at other governance arrangements, that's when you get some sort of legal implications, which I put in the legal imp section, around the legislation then, and when could different governance arrangements be introduced. You don't have to have any of that discussion tonight if you don't want, but the paper lays out a kind of menu of options, and it also says if you go looking, you'll find there isn't like a perfect template somewhere that says how do you review your own governance. So a little bit of this is about us putting shape in it, and my recommendation, the officer recommendation, is that monitoring officer works with group leaders to develop some terms of reference and a resource plan, which then goes directly to full council in July. The reason I've said that is there isn't another P&R meeting before July, and I think we want to kind of get started, you know, with a sort of terms of reference signed off at the July full council meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think it is probably a bit late for too many innovative ideas, but Adam?
One question about delegation. You clearly rule out matters within the scheme of delegation to officers won't be covered. But what about, but then under bullet point 4, the first bullet point 4.2, member involvement in decision making. Now, I think there's no great appetite for going to a cabinet and the different model of management. I think there's no appetite for that. So but we do need to look at the committee system and see how it can be made more streamlined. And I asked that question on induction. Is there a power to give chairs greater powers of decision making so that matters of unimportant discussion can be, without discussion, can be made quickly and easily by the chair of a committee? So almost a hybrid.
Chair and Vice Chair.
Chair and Vice Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, you did raise that in the training the other night. It's a consequence of the committee system that is just simply set out in the 1972 legislation, that it is ultra vires to delegate decision making to an individual councillor. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I think it's important, obviously, to kind of understand how we've got to this place and to this report. I mean, since the introduction of the committee system, and you know, the initial shock of I suppose those that hadn't worked in a committee system to work in the committee system, and then how we've gradually sort of transformed, evolved into the working mechanism that we've got, and to come to the decisions that we've got. And one of the constant nag has always been of whether how do we scrutinise ourselves within that system? Are we doing an effective job? We're in a committee system. Everybody's generally quite collaborative, and we get things done. You know, in terms of that, and how do we know we're making those decisions? And hence the need for this review at this stage to understand what is that, and also obviously the expectation from the general public in terms of that. Actually, if everybody's getting on in here, who's challenging us, who's challenging the officer? So it's a duty that we owe to the general public as well, that expect us to make decisions and for us to be accountable for those decisions. So it's absolutely necessary that we're going down this process. And the other thing that you've highlighted is actually how many times does a report need to have a hearing within the system in order for it then to get finally approved. You know, having to go through 3 or 4 different committees and cycles before finally going through, and even though that it may not be that significant. So we're in, obviously, and also alongside that, the boundary review that's happened, and we're in a 4-year cycle now as well. And I think it's absolutely necessary that this council takes this opportunity to make sure those measures are scrutinised and new processes introduced to make sure that we're fit for purpose going forward.
Thank you very much. Alex?
Thank you. So the only thing I wanted to raise really was that, having read over the previous governance report from 2019, it was a really good report, and I think it highlighted a lot of the advantages of the committee system. And having sat in on meetings here and meetings at the County Council, I think there's a lot nicer atmosphere here because of the committee system than there is on the cabinet system for the County Council. But the main thing I wanted to highlight, for if the next report could avoid using 3D pie charts, because I don't think they're a very good way of presenting information, because they tend to highlight the thing that's right at the front rather than at the back. So if we can avoid 3D pie charts, that's my main feedback for the future.
Thank you. I'm not sure that's going to make the greatest difference to our decision making, but thank you. Pat?
Thank you, Chair. I think Adam Scott is right that for me, that I have no appetite for a cabinet system. One of the reasons is that I think that the committee system values individual councillors much more than a cabinet system does. Being a backbencher is a fairly soulless thing to be, actually. And I think the committee system does value our views and gives us a much greater input into policy as individuals. and that's right across the piece, every party, in fact. That said, there are, of course, resource and capacity implications which we need to consider quite seriously. But I'll leave it there for tonight.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, it is quite interesting going back and looking at the 2017 report. I think Louis is the only councillor still that remains a councillor that's been re-elected. The other colleagues have fallen by the way by different means, and also quite an interesting bits of political history of the makeup of the administration in the years preceding that. I think it's probably important to put on record, I mean, as Jabba says, no, we're at the beginning of a 4-year administration, which is a novel concept for Worcester City. And within the Labour group, within the councillors that have just been elected, we did have the discussion and confirmed our commitment to the committee system. But it absolutely could work more efficiently. It could be improved. And I'm really, really mindful at this time of night, you know, the resource, the officer time and our time to be sitting here, having these conversations and making these decisions. And time is an important resource, as well as the finance and the budget resource. So yes, people happy with the recommendations that a review of the committee system that will be inclusive and come to positive conclusions, hopefully. Everybody in agreement? Yeah?
In terms of the scope of the report is not limited to anything in here, that we have an option of adding to that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if it's possible to get to a place by the start of July that we have terms of reference agreed between the three group leaders and deputies, then that can be a very firm and final set of terms of reference that goes to full council in July and kicks off the review. And clearly I'll be working in the run up to that to do work where I think members are minded to agree that anyway. So we always use a really bland example, like give JCSE a power of primacy to approve HR policies. I'm sure you're not going to wrestle me to the floor over that one. So I'm going to take that as read and start working on that basis as an example. But there could be other things that you want more time to talk about. So it might be that it's a phased approach, like we did with the boundary review. So the terms of reference might be complete for the 9th of July, or they might be complete in some respects with other things to be reviewed again. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. So all those in agreement with the recommendations before us. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Agenda item 14, Household Support Fund Tranche 5 allocation for the time period April 24 to September 2024.
Chair, Chair, belatedly, but thankfully we received a 5th tranche of household support funding that covers the period for April to September. News of that came through in March, and we had to start spending it by April, so we couldn't wait until this evening's policy committee to take a decision on that. And officers, through David and through chairs and vice chairs, worked up a plan on how to spend that. That plan is set out in the report. It's based on how we've allocated household support funding previously. And so when we use Managing Director urgency powers, our constitution mandates us to report it back to P&R committee. So this evening's committee is simply a noting report to let members know what we've done in using David's MD powers.
Thank you. Yeah, and it is only for 6 months, which is, you know, leaves us with serious there was serious concern, wasn't it, that the government actually was going to give us nothing, and you know it would have a massive impact on those suffering from the cost of living crisis. So yes, I was part of making the decision. Thank you. Noted. Right.
I agree.
We have one item of AOB. You can't go home quite yet. Sorry. At full council, there was a list of a limited list of outside bodies where the council needs to nominate someone quite urgently. The longer list of outside bodies will be coming to July P&R. But tonight we've got Hot Market Charity. The nominations, the appointments are made on an annual basis. So currently we have nominated Jenny Barnes, Lynn Denham, Adam Scott. There are still vacancies for up to 4 councillors and 1 independent member. We've had an independent person, Stephen Hodgson, former councillor, who's expressed an interest. So we're happy to accept Stephen's offer. Need offers from other parties to fill the gaps, please. Jessie?
Guess I'd like to nominate myself for it.
Bless you. Thank you. Louis? I have to say that's really quite disappointing. You know, being a councillor is not just being in this room. We have a general civic duty. This is a charity that is constituted and has to be elected members that participate in it. So if you're a process of contributing towards that, or you only want other political parties to be part of it? So if you could put the microphone on, it might be helpful. When are you likely to consider your options? When are we likely to have an answer so that Julian can actually tell the Hot Market Charity and that we can constitute that?
There have been a number of other things that have been very pressing, and we are not yet having fully decided what our next steps are.
Sorry, yeah, my colleagues just had a good suggestion that if the committee approved tonight any nominations that are made tonight, and then also delegates to myself in consultation with chair and vice chairs of this committee to approve any other further councillor nominations that are made between now and the next Policy and Resources Committee, because that's a late date in July. And members will be aware that there's quite a pressing need to convene a meeting on the Hot Market Charity. So I think that delegation would help if there are any other names to come forward after tonight. But there was you had another.
When are the meetings? Because I cannot take on any more daytimes. I actually have a day job.
Through you, Chair, ordinarily the Hot Market meets at 5 p.m. on either a Monday or a Thursday. Yeah.
It can be a hybrid meeting as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go on then. She said enthusiastically. Can you tell?
Thank you very much. Well, we await to hear further, and I guess within the Labour group.
Those nominations. So we've got
So,
names tonight
okay.
and a delegation to take any others.
Okay, so we are agreeing the nominations we've already received. So that's Karen Lawrence, Jessie Jagger, Jenny Barnes, Lynn Denham, Adam Scott, and the independent Stephen Hodgson. So we're accepting of those. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That leaves us with 2 vacancies then. So 2 vacancies. Okay, thank you. The next one is Town Deal Board. Has to be a councillor, yes. There are 2 nominations potentially. So myself as leader, and then the other proposal was from Robin Norfolk, because chair of PED seems relevant, if people are happy to accept those. Yep, thank you. And then Worcestershire County Council Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Richard has offered, but we don't want to remove the opportunity if somebody else is absolutely dying to do it. Jessie?
Councillor Sarah Murray was interested in putting herself forward for this, but it seems that it might be during the daytime, and so I'm not sure whether the time commitments at this stage would be too much for her. I would need to check with her now that we've had a conversation about the time commitment, so I don't know if there's a room for getting back after I've had a chance to speak to her.
John.
Move to a point on that basis so that you've got someone in post and Richard's offering to give way if
Okay, so we're working on the basis that Richard will be appointed unless, and he'll be able to share the dates. It does meet, it is daytime. It is, yeah. I mean, I'm on it as a county councillor, so it is a significant commitment. But if we share the dates with Sarah, and then if she can come back fairly rapidly with a decision. So on that basis, appoint Richard Udall. Is your computer dying as well?
It's just, yeah, mine's just died. We'll have to sort out when our laptops get updated, won't we? We'll have to move them to a later time, won't we?
So appointing Richard Udall and with Sarah Murray back up if available. That's it.
Thank you.
Hooray. Meeting closed. Well done, everybody.
IT don't expect us